Hey, how you doing?
Hey, you know what? I'm hanging in there. It's been another long week at work, but I am done. And this is the first thing I get to do with my weekend. I literally got off work an hour and a half ago, and now I get to record with you. What could be better? I'm feeling good.
Man, it is hard for me to imagine something better than spending time with me.
I know, and you get to do it all the time.
I know, I carry a mirror around explicitly for this reason.
Yeah, I get it. Well,
But,
how is the
yeah.
Missouri Josh, the one we all came to this podcast for in the first place?
Well, I am doing decently. It has been a trying week. I have been in the process of figuring out what I want to do when I grow up. And I have, over the last couple of months, applied for 51 jobs.
Wow.
Christian jobs, nonprofit jobs, literally everything from Walmart manager to some pastoral jobs. And that is just a wearing and complicated journey of figuring out what comes next in life. And so, honestly, it's just, I've talked to a number of folks who are in this space in their mid 40s, and none of us expected to need to figure out what we were going to do for work in our mid 40s. By then, we figured we would be settled into a career and just going. And so it is practically and emotionally complicated. But one of the great gifts that the weekend gives is that nobody's going to be emailing back about jobs for a couple of days. So I am forced to set it aside and focus on other things, which is great. And so right now, that is talking to you.
All right. Yeah. For my whole career, I have worked at least a portion of the weekend. And so today, as we record, is a Saturday. And I love working Saturdays. I don't love working Saturdays, but one thing I love about working Saturdays when I have to is there's no email. None of the bosses are emailing. None of the things that I do during the week are, I just have to focus on my task list and operations. And that's so nice.
That totally makes sense to me. In both pastoral jobs I had, the lead pastor did not work on Mondays. And I loved working on Mondays when the people over me weren't. I actually got stuff done. It was awesome. So I totally get that. But I'm guessing you didn't call to talk about productivity.
No, I didn't. I actually called because I don't know if you know this, but I wrote down something that you said the other day. So we had finished up the episode Beyond Hostility, last week's episode. And in that, we really talked a lot about the need to have lots of different voices at the table and to be theologically hospitable. And though I really liked where we landed in that, our post-conversation included something that you said that it's really stuck with me. And I'm wondering if I can, one, requote you, and two, kind of use it as the basis for our conversation today, because I'm wondering what you meant by it, and I'm wondering if I agree.
Ooh, this is ominous.
I know. Yeah.
Sure.
So can I challenge you on an episode and just surprise you? Yeah. That sounds great. Well, here we are.
Away.
Okay. So if I quoted you correctly, you said, as a Christian, I am inherently a pluralist. I want all ideas to be at the table, and I don't want my ideas to be the governing ones. That is a rather fascinating thing to say. And I'm not sure that a lot of Christians would say that. And so I'm really intrigued by it. I'm drawn to parts of it, and other parts of it, I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on here? So I guess I'll start with, did I quote you right, or do you feel that same sentiment? And what were you trying to get at?
Oh man, so let's start off by at least acknowledging I said this off the cuff. So
Yeah.
I, I'm not going to live and die by this, nor do I think it is the inspired word of God, so I don't think I need to. However, as I reflect on my own comment, I think to myself, yeah, absolutely. I totally think that. So I would love, and I agree, I think that in part I have embraced this perspective as a response to a very different traditional evangelical Christian approach to politics and society. And so, yes, let me at least flesh out a little bit of what I think I mean by this. And frequently, I say things without realizing all of the potential implications of what I say. And so I would love to have you tell me why this is a crazy thing to say and why I should never say it again.
Well, okay. First of all, one, I acknowledge it was off the cuff, and I just happened to write it down because it was so intriguing. But thank you for being willing to talk about this, because I think this is really interesting. I do want us to correct, in some ways, a tendency within evangelicalism, or at least a tendency that we grew up with, that really excluded a lot of voices from the table and said, you're not worthy of participating in the conversation. And I'm not sure that I want to live there, but anyway, tell me more about what it is that prompted you to say that and what it is you're trying to express.
I think, so let me start with the idea of pluralism, because I was having this conversation recently with my son, who is a profoundly verbose young man, and he had no idea what the word pluralism meant. So when I use the word pluralism, what I really mean is that we as a society have agreed that there should be a marketplace of ideas in which we discuss ideas openly, and in the midst of that discussion, each individual is free in their own mind to decide which idea is best and let that idea win for him or herself. So if we're going to talk about economics, 57 different economic theories are free to come to the table to be part of the discussion. It is not that they are necessarily all equal, but everybody's free to come to the table and present their thought and idea. And generally speaking, as a representative democracy, we're going to move loosely in the general direction of the majority while respecting perspectives that are different from the majority. So this is my high school history teacher said, American democracy believes that majority rules with respect to minority rights. So I'm reacting against two things. On the one hand, I'm reacting against a version of evangelicalism that I grew up in that believed that the end goal of Christianity was for Christianity to control the systems and structures of society and remake them in a Christian image. And on the one hand, I believe that that is poisonous to Christianity, that we end up losing more than we gain when we do that. On the other hand, I think that we have a frequent liberal idea that on certain things, if you disagree with me on my beliefs, we can't have a discussion. The discussion has to start with us agreeing. And I actually think that is a mirror image of what the conservatives do, and I'm uncomfortable with it on both sides. I really want a marketplace of ideas where the ideas can be evaluated on their own merits, which means it is free and safe to express them without vitriol to the person who is doing the expressing. So I can disagree with your idea, and that is not a statement of my opinion of you as a human being.
Well, okay, so I'm with you on so much of this, and I appreciate you threw in there this one sentence that I've really latched onto, which is not all ideas are equal or not necessarily equal. And that really has me questioning, how do we go about this in real life? Because if you want an open table where everybody is welcome, and I agree with the vitriol. I mean, I think we can just agree there and potentially, for the sake of this conversation, set that aside and say, of course, we have to be civil with one another, right? So, yes, I want the civility to stay, period. But I don't believe every opinion, every idea, every conviction has equal weight or equal merit at the table. And I say that because there's a belief within our society that whatever you want to believe is fine and whatever I want to believe is fine. And, so long as we just get along, that's all we really need. And that is false on two fronts. First of all, if society A has all of these values and beliefs, that's fine for society A. And if society B has a completely different set of values and beliefs, that's fine for society B. But we don't live in a world where society A and society B live in their own little islands. Society A interacts with society B rather frequently. And so what are going to be the dominant values, the way that we interact together? What are the values that are going to govern that interaction? And if we can't agree even on that, somebody has to, quote unquote, win. And really that ends up meaning whichever society is stronger, society A or society B, wins. And we've really reduced the argument down to violence at some level. The other thing that I don't like about this idea that all values, all morality, all whatever are equal is if that's true, moral progress is impossible. So for instance, Martin Luther King Jr., right? He stood for the civil rights. Well, in a world where all moral values are equal, we just, as a society, traded one set of acceptable moral values for another set of acceptable moral values after the civil rights movement. And we really didn't progress any. We didn't change any for the better or for the worse. We just changed. There's no evaluation of the change. So there's no moral reform that's possible. So with all of that in mind, it leads me to the conviction that not all ideas are equal. And so to what degree then should we allow all ideas at the table? I mean, some of them are just wacky. And in my opinion, this is an emotional statement. I don't know that it's necessarily a theological statement or a Christian statement. It's just like, let me just be real. I don't have time for that nonsense.
Yeah. And I think a couple of things. And it's interesting to me how much of this is governed by principles that I was introduced to by Mr. Jackson in my junior year AP government class. So it's so interesting to me so thank you to Mr. Jackson. But I think, first of all, people are welcome to have opinions that you have no interest in discussing, as long as it doesn't impact you. If I believe, for example, what was the prophet's name? Balaam and the donkey, right? Like, if I read that story and become convinced that all donkeys are in fact angels in disguise.
Okay. I love the absurdity. Proceed.
Right? Like, there is no impact on your life. None. And I think there are a host of issues in which we have to acknowledge somebody else has an opinion. That opinion, in my opinion, is deeply ungrounded, but it has no impact on my life, so that's fine. If they want to have an ungrounded opinion that I have no time for, but it has no impact on my life. Why should I care? So that's one giant category of things. This has no impact on my life. Another giant category of things is issues that impact all of us. So let's imagine somebody has the deep and profound opinion that because Revelation says that the streets will be made of gold, therefore all streets should be yellow when they are paved.
Okay.
Right? Like, we have decided that, generally speaking, it is in fact the quantity of voices that gets to determine policy. So if one person thinks that, they're welcome to come to the table and try to convince everybody else that that's true. But unless everybody else, a large percentage of people actually buy into that, he or she is just going to be saying it loudly and nobody's going to change anything. And so the belief in a majority guards us against absurd outliers, while giving those outliers the freedom to be prophetic in their call to society if necessary. And by allowing those ideas into this sort of marketplace of ideas, someone who wants the streets to be painted yellow will lose the conversation. Someone like Martin Luther King Jr., who was presenting a different view of America that was a profound improvement, was able very slowly and to honestly a limited extent, he was able to gain success and hearing for his message that changed our country. But because what you're changing is the minds of the majority, it was a slow and gradual change. I'm not saying it should be a slow and gradual change. I'm saying that the nature of our society's makeup or systems and structures dictate that all changes will be gradual. Because what you're doing is winning the minds and hearts of individuals so that you can go from being a lone voice to a majority voice. That should be a slow process, because if it's a slow process, the yellow street painters will never become a majority.
Well, I mean, unless, I think we've seen examples of where the yellow street painters have become a majority in some areas, or at least gained enough influence to affect things. But
hold on a second. I don't think we have. I am going to stand on this. What I think has happened is that there are potentially reasonable people who have different opinions than me. And because I don't like them, I tell everybody, those are yellow street painters. They're absurd. If I would just shut up and listen, I bet they make a better point than I'm willing to admit. If a majority of people are actually listening, then there is rational, reasonable something going on there. And I do not think it's helpful to the public square when we call large swaths of Americans absurd.
All right. That is a fair criticism of my statement. I accept that.
And the moderate Christians do this all the time in the political sphere. That's why I have such fire behind it, is because they're like, man, we should be able to have a better political dialogue. And we really would if all those conservatives would stop being so stupid, without being on any level aware of how hypocritical that is.
Sure.
And not being, I'm more in the moderate space, so I'm criticizing my own people there. But anyway, sorry, go on.
Well, all of this has been a wonderful tribute to Mr. Jackson, and
yes.
It's fantastic on that score. But I'm really more curious on the religious convictions score, because your statement included, as a Christian, I am inherently a pluralist. And so I'm curious, that to me means that even in the religious sphere, where we're debating ideas about who is God and what is the character and nature of God and how do we come to know him, those things, it sounds like you also want to have a fairly open conversation or a very open conversation about. And once again, not all ideas of God are equal. And so how far are you wanting to kick open that door?
Well, I actually start from a different space than this. And so I don't know if this answers the question or not, but for me, the options I'm aware of are some attempt at Christian social or political dominance, or some kind of hospitable Christian pluralism. I'm sure there are other alternatives, but those are the ones I'm conscious of in this moment. And what I really come to pluralism, and I become a pluralist as a Christian. I'm not a pluralist because I want to guard my democracy. I'm a pluralist because I want to guard my Christianity, because I believe that Christianity is damaged in becoming the dominant voice. As I look back at church history on every era from Constantine, the Middle Ages, and the Crusades onward, what I see is a Christianity that doesn't transform the state, but is corrupted by the state into something that is profoundly, embarrassingly sub-Christian, that I just don't want Christianity to become ever again. And I think it is intrinsic to being in authority that Christianity is damaged. So that's why I say, as a Christian, I am inherently a pluralist, because I think the other option leaves my Christianity in greater danger than pluralism does.
Well, okay, so this is really interesting. So what I think you're saying is, if you look back at Constantine, for instance, and the Roman Empire, and when Christianity became the ascendant, dominant, or the state-sanctioned, state-approved religion, and it had blessing from the top, it had a corrupting influence on Christianity because Christianity became more about power and authority over the state than it did about Christ and living a cruciform life. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly. The next generation of Christians after that happened were so uncomfortable with the impact that legitimacy had on the church that they all ran away and hid in the desert, right? This is where the monastic movements come from, is these Christians who are saying Christianity is no longer what it was supposed to be. It is a sinking ship, and we can't participate in Christianity anymore as it is currently being publicly practiced.
Okay. Well, I absolutely agree with that. If I may, I want to read you something that came up in my reading this week that I think that I knew I wanted to talk about this. And so obviously it just connected the dots for me. And so this is potentially the beginning of an argument on the other side of the equation. So this is from a selection of readings for Lent and Easter. It's a book or a compilation called Bread and Wine. And the author of this happens to be a guy named William Willimon. I don't know him other than what I just read in this book about him. So, but he begins his article by saying, "The church of today lives in an ethically debilitating climate. Where did we go wrong? Was it the urbane self-centeredness of Peel's power of positive thinking and its therapeutic successors? Was it the liberal civic club mentality of the heirs to the social gospel? Now we waver between evangelical TV triumphalism with its Madison Avenue values, or live and let live pluralism, which urges open-mindedness as the supreme virtue." And so I guess the argument on the other side is, if Christianity, on the one hand, could be damaged by becoming the ascendant political power, it could be damaged on the other side by liberal pluralist values that say everybody is welcome at all times, period. Don't judge anybody ever. That's the highest moral value. Isn't there a danger on that side too?
If I believed that pluralism meant nobody should judge anybody else, then yes. This is why I believe pluralism really is ultimately what I said before, which is a marketplace of ideas in which the ideas stand for themselves and we can dialogue about them with the confidence in the truth that the best ideas will win. Right? It's not, this is the, I said there was something on the conservative side and something on the liberal side that I was uncomfortable with. What he's responding to, I don't think is authentic pluralism, because a, a healthy pluralist will welcome everybody to the table, but will not thereby say all ideas are equal. I mean, we don't do that in any arena. I mean, if we polled 100 Americans and said, what percentage of your income do you think you should be paying in taxes? We very well might get 24 different answers.
Sure.
They don't get to just pay whatever taxes they want because all ideas are equal. And we can poll as many Americans as we want. That doesn't have any impact even on simple things like the speed limit. The speed limit is generally what it is. All of this to say a consensus emerges through open and authentic dialogue that presumably is based on good conversation if we are, in fact, giving everybody the space at the table, which I do not think is dangerous to Christianity, because I am convinced that if a meaningful and non-antagonistic conversation happens between my beliefs and someone else's beliefs, be they religious or social or political or whatever, if I honestly give them the space and listen to them, they will either help me see ways in which I am wrong, in which case, so be it, or they will not, in which case, so be it. Either way, I get closer to truth.
It's interesting just to hear you explain all of this. I'm going back over your quote as I contemplate it. As a Christian, I am inherently a pluralist. I think what you're saying is the truth has nothing to fear from inquiry, and we stand a lot to lose as a church if we gain power and ascendancy and we start focusing on power over living a cruciform life like our Messiah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're inherently a pluralist in order to protect the Christian ideals of living in a Christ-like cruciform way. You want all ideas to be at the table, and you don't want yours to be the governing ones because you don't want to dominate others with your Christian convictions. You want them to be a part of the conversation. You believe they deserve a prominent place in the conversation, but they shouldn't be the governing ones in a power sort of structure. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's exactly what I'm saying.
Well, I have to say, you're convincing me to be a Christian pluralist.
Yeah, I think even of some of my kids' friends at high school who are coming from a variety of different perspectives and feel strongly about a variety of different issues, a host of whom, in my Midwestern context, have perceived the church to be the controller of the conversation, and who will not step into a church because of the way the church has handled that power and authority. It has not been good for evangelism in my children's generation, the way that church has handled itself when it had power. And I think to myself, was it worth it? We won some social wars and lost a lot of souls. Do we think that that's okay?
Yeah, it absolutely matters. I know that in my workplace, we Christians are a strong minority. And even in my state and in my region, we are a minority. We have to learn to have conversations. And at least in many of the contexts I find myself in, we have to overcome some of the stigma of not wanting to have conversation or being judgmental before we ever enter a conversation. So I totally get what your kids' friends are referring to. There is this perception that we're not willing to discuss anything. It is the way it is. Close the book. God said it. I believe it. That settles it. We're done here.
And, we talked a lot last time about ways in which we lose out when we have that attitude. And I think my point today is that not only do we as individuals are we impoverished, but I think we corporately as a church and we corporately as a society are impoverished when the church takes those kind of stances.
I think you're right.
Me too.
But I have spent the last 30 minutes putting you on trial. Let's turn to the jury, the audience, and see what they have to say. I would love to know what the audience reaction is to this conversation. This is definitely something that is a live, in our cultural moment issue. And so I would love to know where people fall on this. What is your reaction to this conversation? Are you in any way a Christian pluralist coming into this conversation? Are you a Christian pluralist coming out of this conversation? What do you think of those terms and the attitudes and the thought behind them that's been discussed here today? I'm very eager to hear.
And I would go one further than this. I would love, so many of our listeners are in the general space that we're in, at least close-ish. I would love for you guys who participate in this conversation by listening, share this podcast with somebody that you think is going to disagree, and then let us know what they said, because they may have some really insightful ways in which we're missing things.
Yeah, man. Well, and that I kind of envy the conversation you might have as a result. I think this could be a good starting point for a very interesting conversation.
Yeah, 100%. But please let us know.
All right. Well, Josh from Missouri, I have put your thoughts on trial. I think they came out pretty good, but now I want to know what else you're thinking about.
Well, I first of all, I'm glad that they came out pretty good, because to be honest, the only thing I care about is proving whatever I said in the past right. So, that's great. But it's funny that you brought up my thoughts, because my other thoughts this week have actually been circling around something you said in a previous episode as well. So that's kind of ironic.
Yeah.
But yeah, do you remember a couple of weeks back, you were sharing your thoughts about the moment of reconciliation between Peter and Jesus at the lake?
Yeah.
Where Peter's in the boat and he sees Jesus and he realizes it's Jesus and goes running to him and all of that. The way you told that story, you kind of tonally emphasized the fact that that Peter kind of jumped out of the boat and ran to Jesus. And I've just been deeply struck this week by the ways in which that is so opposite what happened with Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve sinned profoundly, and when God came looking, they ran and hid. Peter, who knows darn well he has messed up royally, and he is clearly emotional and defensive about it. But when the moment comes and he realizes Jesus is around, something in him runs towards Jesus, even in the midst of his unreconciled state.
Yeah,
That is captivating to me.
absolutely. Especially when you compare it against Adam and Eve's reaction.
Right? Like, I just, it reminds me, and I have this quote kind of echoing through my mind more frequently than I probably realize. But Aslan says in one of the Narnia books, do not dare not to dare.
Hmm.
And this moment, the only person who could keep Peter away from the grace and forgiveness and reinstatement that Jesus is offering was Peter. And without a thought, he just beelines it to Jesus. Fish and lake and water and friends be darned. That's Jesus. Nothing else matters.
Well, and as you're reflecting on this, I'm kind of sucked into the story once again and thinking it's not just a decision that he made in the midst of needing to repent or needing to be restored. I think we can celebrate that moment and that decision. But how much of that was out of habit? He always ran to Jesus. You see it all through the Gospels. You see Jesus walking on water and Peter's like, can I come? Like he runs to be where Jesus is all the time. And I wonder if, as much as we should praise that moment of decision, wonder if we should praise all the other moments that made it just such a habitual way to live his life.
Oh, I think you're spot on. I don't think he made a decision in this moment. I think there was a pile up of past decisions that left him without a choice in this one. He had formed his character previously so that in this moment when it mattered, there was only one way to run. I think you're exactly right. And I appreciate you saying this because I was thinking that and I didn't actually say that. And I think, man, how exciting is that to think we can form ourselves to run towards Jesus in the hard moments by choosing to run towards Jesus in other moments.
Yeah, I think, what was it? Dallas Willard referred to this as, I am the type of person who fill in the blank.
Yeah.
And you do something over and over and over, and pretty soon you are the type of person who does that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And Peter is the type of person who ran to Jesus. He did it so many times. Nobody could deny that's just the type of person Peter was.
Mm-hmm. And it may have had some quirky moments, but boy, did it save his bacon in this one.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I want to run to, not run away.
Mm.
So that's what I've been thinking about. But what about you? What have you been thinking about other than my heretical social gospel heathenistic quotations?
Honestly, yeah, that's it. That's been the whole thing. Maybe the other thought of, I need to stop doing a podcast with this guy. But
wisdom has finally come to you.
Yeah. So this is more just an experience. I don't know. Yes, it's a thought. It's an ongoing thought. It's a thought that I feel like God hits me with so many times. Maybe someday I will get it. It was fascinating. Last weekend, I had once again worked a lot of hours at work. And I remember telling my coworker, I said, man, I'm so glad that both Friday and Saturday I'm scheduled to work 14-hour days because I have so much on my to-do list. I don't think I could get it done otherwise. I'd already worked, 2 other days before that. And then those 2 back-to-back 14-hour days, I was using every minute trying to get stuff done. And I did. I got it done. I felt amazing about it. I really knocked it out of the park. But I was exhausted. And I get to church the next day and I'm like, oh man, I need this. I need to be here. And it was another experience of just feeling the presence of God and feeling like, okay, this is home. This is reality. This is the good stuff. This is where life really is. Why do I constantly get sucked into my to-do list? Why do I constantly find all of my value, all of my time, all of my energy being devoted to getting stuff done and knocking it out of the park? Why does that matter to me so much? And then I got sick. I got sicker than a dog. I was down for like 2.5, 3 days. Could not get out of bed. I was just so sick. And I was like, oh, yeah. Okay, God, this is enforced rest. I thank you. And I wish it hadn't come to this, but I get it. And then I got better and I went back to work and then this week began Lent. And as a church, we are trying a digital fast. So we are turning our smartphones into dumb phones. We are trying to disconnect from digital media. We are trying to be much more present and available to God, to one another, to Scripture, all of those things. And so we're using the oft wasted time in digital media to connect in genuine relationships and connect with God. And as I have started to engage that practice, and as I've done some of my Lent readings, I just feel this to be true all over again. This need to just unplug, do less, stop with all of the frenetic checking of the phone and checking the email and getting stuff done and doing tasks and ignoring big tasks because I want to check out from reality for a while. So let me just scroll my phone. And I don't know. It's just misplaced priorities. Maybe that's the way to document my thought here. Just experiencing misplaced priorities and trying to figure that out again.
I get it. It is an ongoing challenge for so many of us to find balance or rhythm that really matches what we are as human beings.
Yeah.
And it's not easy, is it?
No. And it's not, I mean, I know I talk about working a lot of hours, but look, we're a small team as a supervisory group at the 911 center. We have to have supervisors on duty 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And when people are out on medical leave or people want to take a vacation or whatever, we have got to backfill for one another. I'm helping out my team. I'm obviously helping myself financially by picking up overtime. That there's, it's not altruism, but I feel like it's a legitimate use of my time that I spend so much time at work. And yet, I have tasks that I have to do while I'm at work, and I have tasks that I have to do as a husband, a father, a homeowner, or whatever. Like, I don't know. I don't feel like I use my time poorly, but I feel like I do way too much. And so, how do you reconcile those two things? I feel like I get sucked back into this world over and over and over.
I am totally with you, and I, for one, would love to have a longer conversation kind of wrestling with this question sometime, because I think we all find ourselves trying to figure out this balance at certain moments in our lives.
Yeah. I just think that conversation would depress our audience.
You may be right. Oh, man. Well, speaking of cheering our audience up, are you ready for a Which Josh question?
Sure. Let's do it.
All right. Well, here it is. This week's Which Josh question is, which Josh has movie nostalgia?
So this is me, Josh from Oregon. I came home the other night and my wife and my oldest son were in the process of compiling a list of movies from each of their respective childhoods that they would like to go back and rewatch because it just has such a prominent place in their childhoods. And so, of course, I got sucked into this conversation when I walked in the door, and it was fascinating to think about some of these things. I don't know what would be on your list, but if I go all the way back to my early childhood, I was obsessed with the movie Pete's Dragon. As an adult, I couldn't tell you the storyline of Pete's Dragon. And I'm like, okay, well, I know this factoid about myself because I've been told it, but I would actually really like to rewatch Pete's Dragon and know what it is I was so intrigued about when I was little. But things that actually have me feeling nostalgic, like I would really like to rewatch Short Circuit. Do you remember that movie?
Yes.
The Johnny Five Alive, that line just resonates with me. So I would love to watch that. And, if I go even later into my growing up years, when we hit like teenager and beyond, I have so many movies. Not all of them are going to be appropriate, but I have to tell you, Die Hard is on my list. I watched Die Hard so many times as a teenager. I watch it frequently just for that. And so now that I'm like in this movie nostalgia kind of frame of mind, I'm like, I could watch all of the Die Hard movies. That would be just fine.
Oh man, I was thinking about this as you were saying this. I'm like, okay, what movies are on my list here? And it is a weird, I came up with 3, and it is a weird list.
Okay. I feel like Pete's Dragon, Short Circuit, and Die Hard is a weird list. So
yeah, I guess I'm sharing mine in lieu of mocking yours.
okay.
But first of all, probably reaching as far back as I can, I want to rewatch Flight of the Navigator.
Oh, yes, we talked about that. Yes, that's a great movie.
A great movie. A little bit more recently, but man, if there's a movie I watched a million times and my sense of humor was so profoundly formed by it that I feel for those who spend time with me because they are stuck in a loop. But it is Get Smart Again. I must have seen that movie 100 times.
Okay.
And quote it all the time. And then finally, Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home.
Oh.
Just a classic.
Wow, you went straight up nerd there.
Oh, 100%. 100%. I've seen Star Trek IV. I burned the video, the VHS out. I watched it so many times. Like it had the lines on it, and yeah, it was rough. But the least nerdy of the 3 is Get Smart Again. That tells you everything you need to know, right?
Yeah, right.
Flight of the Navigator is not exactly a sports movie.
No, but it's not Star Trek 4.
It's pure science fiction. You realize that, right?
It is, but it's also like a cute kid movie with like weird alien creatures and stuff. And it's not just pure science fiction.
I don't know. I would call it middle. If the concept of middle grade existed back then, I would have called it middle grade science fiction. It is about a sentient spaceship that can transform shape and all of those kinds of things. That's pretty sci-fi.
This is hilarious. We started a conversation about Christian pluralism, and the thing I disagree with you most is your definition of Flight of the Navigator.
All right. Well, we may have to pick that up in a different episode then. We are, I think, about out of time.
We sure are. All right. We'll find something else to argue about next week.
All right. Sounds good. I'll talk to you then.
All right. Bye.
All right, bye.